Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I have been your beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for On SI every single day since August 2019, and we are continuing to move forward through yet another season together. As always, you can find us in our 100% free, 24/7, boots on the ground Jaguars coverage when you follow us on social media such as Facebook and Twitter at Jaguars on SI. You can also find us at www.si.com/NFL/Jaguars. All right, folks, welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter. Today we are talking about what has to be the most maddening aspect of the Jaguars 2025 season, and it is the Jaguars' woeful pass rush. Now, the Jaguars got a decent amount of pressure on Davis Mills on Sunday in terms of volume. You know, per next-gen stats, I believe Josh Hines-Allen and Eric Armstead combined for like 12 pressures. And I'm as big of a pressure guy as there is. I firmly believe pressures are more indicative and telling and stable of a metric than just pure sack numbers. And plus, most teams that rank high in pressure rate rank high in sack rate. The Jaguars don't rank high in either right now. And when they are getting pressures, it feels like they have seemingly been unable to finish the job on so many important plays. I mean, several come to mind against the Texans. Trayvon Walker gets the roughing the passer flag. I agree. It looked very odd. Very much looked like a play that shouldn't be flagged, but if they're determining it was helmet to helmet, you got to hit the strike zone better than that. Trayvon Walker, last play of the game, gets a pressure, completely gets by Trent Brown, but it isn't able to, have the burst to finish on Davis Mills. Falls off Davis Mills on another would-be sack. Devin Lloyd falls off Davis Mills in the backfield. Davis Mills. Josh Hines-Allen, I believe one quarterback hit. It just was not the kind of performance from a pass rush against a backup quarterback and a backup offensive line that you'd expect. In that kind of situation, the Jaguars should have been content with rushing 4 and dropping 7 and doing everything they can to throw resources at Nico Collins. And they had to resort to blitz Mills to impact him. And when they were blitzing him, and it did work, I just don't think that they trust the guys in the back end to do that consistently. I don't think they trust Antonio Johnson and Andrew Wingard at safety enough to have a blitz-heavy defense. I just don't. I'm not sure they trust Greg Newsome enough. Jarian Jones, he played a great game. I'm not sure if they just inherently trust him enough to run that kind of game plan scheme. Buster Brown, he's really good in zone coverage. We've seen his issues with speed and man coverage. If you're blitzing, you're going to place him in man-to-man in a lot of situations. It's easier to run from him when you're blitzing. And when the Jaguars aren't blitzing, it definitely felt like on Sunday that the pass rush left the secondary out to dry. More so than the secondary was simply getting beat over and over again. Like, there were definitely some plays like that. Nico Collins made some impressive plays. But it felt like in crunch time, the Jaguars secondary, how long they had to cover. On that Davis Mills touchdown to Dalton Schultz, for example. They had the play perfectly covered. If there was any sense of pressure, Mills had nowhere to go. But he was able to just sit in the pocket and wait, and eventually Schultz gets an edge on Buster Brown in the back of the end zone. So, to me, the crux of the issue has to go back to the offseason. It's very clear, and when you watch Josh Hines-Allen, I'm not going to say but the pressures and stand on the soapbox. I can read a room. I understand the frustration where much of this fan base is at with this team, with the defense, with the pass rush specifically. But the one thing I will note is when you go back and watch the film, and when you do so against another games, like the Chiefs game, like the Seahawks game, where people had similar reactions, you notice the attention paid to him by the opposing team. I'm not using that as an excuse, but I do think it's important context. And it's context for what I think is the real issue with the Jaguars pass rush, which is that they did not address it this offseason. They signed Emmanuel Ogbah and Dewan Smoot. And, as backup options, they've been, substandard. If either one of them was your fourth option, maybe, it looks better. It's hard for me to completely criticize those moves because I lauded them at the time. Even though evidence pointed to Emmanuel Ogbah dipping as a pass rusher, same with Dewan Smoot, I thought in these specific roles that they would play well, and it just has not happened like that for the Jaguars this year. Dennis Gardeck, it doesn't seem like he's been utilized as a pass rusher much. It really feels like he's become more of a true Sam linebacker in the Jaguars defense, whether that's, because of his knee injury, whatever it is. When he has rushed a passer, hasn't had many notable reps, in my opinion. Obviously, B.J. Green's really raw. Obviously, Danny Strigow's really raw. And then on the interior, Mason Smith just has not developed as a pass rusher. Devon Hamilton is what he is as a pass rusher. Obviously, Kalen Saunders and Austin Johnson are what they are as pass rushers. Eric Armstead has had some nice highs as a pass rusher this season, but I'd definitely say he's probably been their most inconsistent guy. Trayvon Walker has battled the injury. It's hard to tell where Trayvon Walker is right now in terms of, how close he is to being up to 100%. The last two games, he's played a lot more, but he just has not been as effective as a pass rusher than he was when he got injured. That has been the case. They didn't add anybody to help inside. Colin Saunders, Austin Johnson, bottom of the 53-man roster type guys to add. That doesn't count. I think they expected Eric Armstead's move inside to have more of an impact. And he's played better than he played last season for sure. But he also looks just more like a player that's on the downside of his career. No disrespect or anything like that, but he's an older player, and it looks like that's where he's at in this stage of his career. He's a player whose prime days are clearly behind him. There was no other real move made to improve this pass rush. They opted, of course, to trade up for Travis Hunter as opposed to trading up for Abdul Carter. I'm not saying I would have advocated for that. I'm just saying what their options were. Or staying at 5 and picking a Mason Graham. Mason Graham hasn't been good this year, so I don't even think he would have really changed much for the Jaguars, though I do think it's at least an evidence point to them opting to go elsewhere to rebuild it and add anybody in the early stages of free agency or anybody to play a sizable role. They, to me, expected the Armstead movement and development from Mason Smith. And I'd say out of those two scenarios, maybe half of one has happened. You've gotten some more production out of Armstead, but I don't think as much as they were expecting. And that, to me, right now, looks like the biggest mistake of this regime's first offseason together. Not doing more in the defensive trenches. You can talk offensive trenches, too. I think they were kind of stuck with who they had as tackles. They did add a new center and a right guard. The guard they drafted early to, I think, potentially start, got hurt early on, and did not even go in the game when the Jaguars had 3 backup offensive linemen in on the final drive, which is not ideal. So I think you have to put the onus on Gladstone and Cohen and Bazzelli and the front office staff and the coaching staff for the lack of investment in the defensive line and the lack of subsequent development. And I really do think the only way to fix it is to go get better players. To me, it has to be the priority of the offseason. Improve the trenches. Because games like the Texans game, they lost because of the trenches. Games like the Seahawks game, they lost because of the trenches. The Jaguars, simply put, need to get better there. and it probably won't happen until 2026. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name's John Shipley. Be back next time.